Alright, so today we'll be working on 9.3, solving quadratic equations using square roots. So, early in this chapter, we learned about the properties of square roots. And now, we're going to use square roots to solve quadratic equations in this form. Ax squared plus c is equal to 0. Right? And to do that, we need to get x squared by itself. So, to get x squared by itself, we need to get rid of the c and the a. Right? Both c and a. When you get rid of the c, right, and the only way you can get rid of it is by moving to the other side, it will become d. And when you get rid of a as well, it will also become part of the d. So then, once you're able to do that, right, once you get x squared by itself, you can solve it by taking the square root of both sides, right? Whatever you do to the left side has to be done to the right side. And if d is greater than 0, then, the d being this d right here, then it has two real solutions. One positive and one negative. Right? That's what this notation means right here. One positive, one negative. If d is equal to 0, then it has one real solution, x equals 0. If d is less than 0, then it has no real solution. So that might be a little bit confusing. So let's go ahead and try an example. So the first one that we have is 3x squared minus 27 is equal to 0. So what we're going to do is, we need to get rid of this 27, right? So let's go ahead and move it to the right side. It's a little hard to write on here. Okay, so once we do that, we can move it to the right side, leaving us with 3x squared is equal to 27. Now, what should we do next? Try to see if you can figure out the next step by yourself. Make sure to read this again up here and figure out what the next step should be. So now we can take the square root, right? Not quite. Remember, it said to get x squared by itself. This did not include the a, right? There's just 3 in front, which is our a, right? So we need to get rid of this a. And how can we get rid of this? Well, 3 times x squared, so we can divide this by 3 and divide this by 3, which leaves us with 27 divided by 3, and 27 divided by 3 is 9. What's our next step? Well, now, let's look back what it told us to do. So once we isolate it, did we isolate to x squared equals d? Yes, we did. This looks like a 1. Let me fix this a little bit. Okay. So now that it's isolated, we now need to solve by taking the square root of both sides. So let's take the square root. And the reason why we're taking the square root is because we have x to the second power. To get rid of x to the second power and make it just x to the first power, we need to take the square root. And once we take the square root of this, we're left with x is equal to 3. Right? And remember that this is both positive and negative. So that means x is equal to positive 3 and x is equal to negative 3. So when you're asked what your solutions are, right, you're going to write x is equal to positive 3 and x is equal to negative 3. Alright, let's try another one. So in this one, we have x squared minus 10 is equal to negative 10. Alright, and let me bring the chart that we had up here down here again. Alright, so remember, this is really important again. And let's go back and use the information we had from this one. We didn't do it the first time. So we had x equals, let me write it up here actually. We had x squared equals 9. Right? And let's look at our chart over here. It says, it gives us 3 options. Is d greater than 0? Or what's happening here? What is our d equal to? Our d is equal to 9. So is it 9 is less than 0, 9 is greater than 0, or 9 equal to 0? Well, in this case, 9 is greater than 0, which means it has two real solutions. It helps us focus on what we're looking for and shows us if we're getting the right answer or not. So let's use the same idea for the next one. Alright, so once again, we need to isolate x squared. So to do that, we need to get rid of negative 10. So what we're going to do is, we're going to add 10 to both sides. Which leaves us with, let's do this over here actually, x squared is equal to 0. So go ahead and use this information once again and see if there is any information you can get obtained from here, right? Our d is 0. So it says right here, when d is equal to 0, x squared equals d has only one real solution. And it tells us the answer right here already. Right? Our answer is x equals 0. And let's go ahead and finish the problem though anyways. Right? When we have x squared equals 0, we take the square root of both sides. If we take the square root, we get x is equal to 0. And that was the answer. So remember, this is very useful to know so you know what to look for at least. Or it gives you an answer right away actually in this case too. Alright, let's try the next one. Negative fx squared plus 11 equals 16. So once again, let's bring this chart back over here again. Alright, so once again we need to isolate x squared. So let's go ahead and do that. Subtract 11 on both sides. Remember, start with multiplication. Start with addition and subtraction first before you multiply or divide. So now we're left with fx squared is equal to 5. We're going to have to do the rest of the work here. We're not quite done yet. We need x squared by itself. Right? And to do that, we can divide both sides by 5, leaving us with x squared is equal to 1. Oh, I made a mistake here actually. Let's redo this one. Okay, so in this case, I forgot the negative up here, right? We need to put this negative in there. So let's do that with a negative. So 16 minus 11 was 5. Okay, so now we divide both sides by 5, negative 5. And when we do that, we get x squared is equal to negative 1, right? A positive 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. And now we can go ahead and take the square roots. Before we do that, let's look at our chart again. Is our d greater than 0? No, negative 1 is not greater than 0. Is negative 1 equal to 0? No, it's not. Is negative 1 less than 0? Yes, it is. And let's see what it says if d is less than 0. If d is less than 0, then it has no real solutions. So our answer has no real solutions. Let's go ahead and continue this just to check if that's correct. X squared equals negative 1. Let's take the square root of both sides. And as you know, we cannot take the square root of a negative number. If we did, it would be imaginary numbers, which we haven't learned yet. So that's not possible. So we'd write no real solutions. Alright. So now, those are the different ways that you can figure out what the roots are. Alright, now let's move on to solving a quadratic equation using square roots again. So solve x negative 1 to the power of 2 is equal to 25. So to do this, we're going to need to take the square root again. So what we're going to do is, let's take the square root, both sides, which leaves us with x minus 1 is equal to, what is a root of 25? It's positive, negative, and negative 5, right? And now, what are we supposed to do about this though? We have a negative 1. So what we're going to do is, we're going to add plus 1 to both sides. And when we do that, we're left with two different equations, right? So x equals 1 plus minus 5. And what you're going to do is you're going to create two equations. X is equal to 1 plus 5, right? We need to include the positive. And the second one's going to be x is equal to 1 minus 5. And you're going to solve those two. 1 plus 5 is 6, and this is equal to negative 4. So those are two answers. So remember, when you take the square root, you have one positive and one negative, right? Because if we did the square of, say, negative 5 to the power of 2, that's equal to 25. It's still equal to 25, right? Even if we did 5 squared, that would also be equal to 25. All right, let's try another one. So approximating solutions of quadratic equations. Solve 4x squared minus 13 equals 15 using square roots and round the solutions to the nearest hundredth. So for this one, all right, let's see. We're going to do this. So once again, you might have guessed this already. How can we isolate this x squared? That's what we need to do. We need to isolate x squared. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of this 13. Add 13 on both sides. So we're then left with 4x squared is equal to 28. And remember, we need to get x squared by itself, which means we need to get rid of a. And in this case, a is 4. So let's get rid of that a by dividing it. So then x squared is equal to 7. And now, let's continue this over here. We need to take the square root, right? To get rid of this 2 up here, so we can turn it into x. Which then leaves us with x is equal to root 7. In some cases, you can leave it as 7, but in this case, as root 7, but in this case, I want you to use your calculator and figure out what root 7 is equal to. Go ahead and try it on your own. You can also use your phone for this. X is then equal to positive negative 2.65. Alright, and that is it for today.